Hello out there. It's Mario from Symbolic Studies. I am live and it is my birthday. So I wanted to do a little stream. I usually would book a client today and do a tarot reading. And I figure, you know what? I have no sessions. I'm not going anywhere. Might as well do a stream and pop in and say hello, answer some questions, talk about the channel, see what's going on with all you guys and all that fun stuff. So here I am. First things first, I want to see who is here in the chat. Of course, we've got my wife, Michelle, here. Thank you for being here. She's obligated to be here, but thank you for being here regardless. She'll be monitoring things around these parts. Artist Seer, Miri, thank you so much for being here. I love the fact that you're so supportive and you've been very supportive, throughout the years. Some new faces too. TT, welcome. Thank you for hanging out. Lacey Hawk, hello. We've got MS. What's up, MS? You submitted a voicemail. We listened to it. You're in the show. That's coming out on Friday. Vanessa V, what's going on? Fellow Cancer, awesome. Yeah, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork and have told me that this is also their sun sign, so that's rad. We've got Kalani 49. Many thanks, I appreciate it. Normally, I'm the type of person where I don't tell anyone it's my birthday, but I feel like I really had to in this instance. And of course, Michelle encouraged me to do that too. So I'm glad I did. So I'm 41 years old. I was born in 1984. And it's kind of interesting too, because 1984, obviously, there's the whole Orwellian dystopian 1984. And so as I learned about 1984 over the years, I'm like, wow, that is so appropriate, especially given my worldview and what I see just out there on the world stage. So born in 84, there's multiple levels to that for me, at least. Okay, so Ada, hello, welcome. We've got Moonsprout. We've got Marigold. Marigold asks, first question for the stream. Mario, be honest, as a Cancer, how many times have you cried today? Too many to count. I'll be completely honest with you guys. No, I have not cried today. We've got Lost Age. Hello, hello. We've got Ray elsewhere. Greetings. If you're hanging out, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you check this out after the fact, thanks for doing that as well. Loretta Sierra, thank you so much. Old World Micmac, what's good? We've got Kelly Boyles in the house. We've got Tennis, Surf Skate, Bourbon Solstice, quite the name. I'm wondering, what do you enjoy eating, drinking on your birthday? Yes, Michelle is an amazing creator on multiple levels. And I would say, we're trying to be a little bit healthier this year, I'll say, in regards to my birthday splurge. But normally, a traditional thing is I really love her rum cake. Her rum cake is so delicious. It really, that makes me cry. Her rum cake makes me cry. And I like it really boozy too. It's so delicious. It's really good. So I've kind of bypassed requesting a rum cake this year. But I'm sure, in the following years, who knows? I'm sure we'll have it again. Hopefully not too long from now, but that is something that's kind of been a tradition once I had her version of it. So yeah. Thank you. Right on. Okay. David Peasant. Lots of new names. I haven't gone live in a little while. I did go live in Taurus season for sure, but before that, it had been a really long time, and I hadn't done something kind of casual like this in a bit. And it's something that I've been leaning towards doing and wanting to do. I feel like early on with Symbolic Studies, I was going live more and doing hangouts and stuff like that. It's kind of gotten away from me, but I'm trying to do it maybe like once a month, something along those lines. And for a little while, I was thinking maybe I would do it just for patrons or something. And I don't know. To me, that would be fun for sure. But I think that opening it up to all of you guys, is probably the way to do it. So here we are. I am going to be answering questions at the end of the stream here. So there is one or two patron questions that I'll be answering at the midway point, but I'm going to save all questions and answers for the end of the stream. And so if you have a question and you really want me to answer it, hang out and then I will do that. All right. Thank you so much. I feel great. Thank you for asking. Yeah. So feels like another day in some regards, but obviously I'm reflecting over here and thinking about the past year and what's to come and all that stuff. And it's always fun to receive birthday wishes from family and friends and from people I did not expect to. So thank you guys for all of the birthday love. Hoop Daddy 7. Thank you for being here. Ellie the Moonchild. Kabir, what's good, man? Thanks for hanging out. JKC, thank you. Right on. Thanks, dude. He says, or they say, you're live with Robert Phoenix, Leo King, and Evan Grimm was awesome a while back. Yeah. I really liked doing that one. That one was a lot of fun. And I do feel like they kind of pulled out some really great stuff for me. And that's one of the things with doing live streams. There's certain people that really kind of step up your game and make you want to pull out your best insights and whatnot. And I feel like that was kind of an episode like that because I respect Robert so much and all these guys really. And I know that all of their astrological insights, you know, are top tier. And so that's something that I looked at fondly, you know, after it was all said and done. So glad you remember that. Garsh Brooks. Awesome. Many thanks. I appreciate that. I love the name Garsh Brooks. That's great. Hey, Stacey Sunshine. How are you? Happy Cancer Flow Solar Return Mario. Much appreciated. Awesome. So I wanted to reflect a little bit on the last year and just kind of talk about maybe some milestones. I feel like it's only appropriate for my birthday. You know, part of me just wanted to talk about Cancer symbolism and everything else. And I feel like with this type of stream, I want to be a little more personable and transparent with everything. And it's been a good year. And it's, you know, there's just a lot to be grateful for, basically, right? And so just kind of going through my mind over the last year. And also, I feel like this is very Cancerian for a few reasons. Just the idea of reflection. I think this time of year is kind of related to reflection in many ways. You know, with Gemini season, Michelle and I, we talked about the symbolism of the mirror in the Gemini podcast episode. And that definitely is appropriate because I think with Gemini, you know, there's a lot to be said about your relationship with self, your relationship with your invisible twin or spiritual double. And so the mirror comes to mind. And even, you know, Jofra Boss chart, right? Jofra Boss chart. In his Gemini illustration, he actually puts a mirror kind of like right there in the center. And so clearly you can see how reflection makes sense to talk about with Gemini and the twins. And I think that there's something to be said about Cancer relating to this as well. Even the 6-9 of the Cancer glyph, there's kind of this reflective sort of quality between the two, right? And then also water symbolism, water being the first true mirror, you know, for mankind. So that kind of makes sense on that level. And then also, too, there's a whole nature with Cancer and the crab that has to do with retreating, withdrawing, going inward. And I think kind of like looking at the past, you know, it's kind of related to that as well. And so there's a primordial aspect to Cancer that I'm really starting to appreciate now with just how ancient even the crab looks and kind of its ways and things like that. It just reminds me of something very, very primordial. And so this idea of reflection to me just makes all the sense in the world to kind of talk about that, right? And so easily the biggest event that occurred over the last year for me was getting married. So I got married on September 14th, and it was a beautiful wedding, had lots of friends and family around. It was an intimate affair, but it felt really big. You know, there are certainly much bigger weddings out there and wedding parties and everything else. But it still felt obviously clearly monumental. And one of the things that I took away from getting married and doing all of that is literally just how rewarding it was to go through that with my now wife, Michelle. and really just be put through the paces with logistical stuff and figuring things out with the budget, and being in touch with so many people, and doing so many things on our own. We took on a lot of work, and I think both of us could probably safely say that it was way more work than we anticipated. And so for literally weeks, leading up to the wedding, and it was a very, very local affair, you know, um, we're really lucky to live next to someone who has a beautiful, beautiful property, who has hosted weddings in the past. And they were gracious enough to allow us to get married there. And it worked out perfectly that way. So with that said, though, we took care of so many things on our own. And of course, we had people around us like step up and help in their own way. But for weeks, we were planning and doing things and creating things. And just as it got closer and closer and closer, we got busier and busier and busier. And I think a lot of people, obviously, when they get married, they want to be rested, and they want to be relaxed and all that kind of stuff as they have their big day. And at least for me, I felt completely spent. I mean, I was burning at both ends for a little while. And so there were so many little things I thought we were going to be able to do that day that we weren't able to do, because we were just kind of like maxed out, and there was just so much stuff to kind of juggle. And clearly, well, at least, maybe it's not clear to you guys, but it's clear to us, this is our first marriage. And so it's not like we had done weddings before. It's not like this is something that we had like really gone through. And so it was quite the challenge, but it was a really beautiful challenge. And after it was all said and done, and the smoke had kind of cleared and everything had settled, I was like, wow, the biggest sort of thing that I took away from it is how huge of a blessing it was to be challenged like that with Michelle. And so to me, that was beautiful. And then also just to see all of these people from different parts of my life come together and actually meet each other and bond and break bread and everything else. That was absolutely huge too. I mean, people that I never expected would meet each other, met each other, and met my family and, my nieces and nephews and my neighbors and all sorts of stuff. So clearly that is the milestone of the year, was getting married. Beyond that, there's stuff professionally that I feel like I'm really, really feeling grateful for as well. And that is the fact that, I've been a graphic designer for a long time. So I've been a graphic designer since I was a teenager, basically. And shortly after my teenage years, I was essentially, really doing it professionally for a lot of different clients. A lot of if you've never heard this before, I'll go through it briefly, but I started doing a lot of design work for my local music scene growing up. So I did a lot of stuff for metal and hardcore and punk bands and things like that. And that's actually how I found symbolism. Design work, graphic design, that is what led me to the study of symbolism. And little did I know that studying symbolism was actually going to make me a better graphic designer. And it has in so many different ways, right? So for a long time, I've done work for corporate clients and small mom and pop shops and sort of everything in between. Huge, huge, huge corporations, really tiny small businesses, independent businesses, and things like that. And when I started Symbolic Studies, I really felt like I needed to keep things separate. I felt like I really needed to keep my clients, and my design work and freelance work completely separate from what I was doing on YouTube here and on Instagram and everything else. And I was really self-conscious about that. And over the years, I realized that I was actually sort of shortchanging myself and missing a lot of good opportunities by keeping them separate. So I would say over the last year or two, I've made it more known that I'm a graphic designer, that in actuality, design work is what allows me to do symbolic studies, right? And so Symbolic Studies isn't in a place where I can just solely focus on that. It was for a little while, or I thought it was at least, but I've kind of come to the realization that I'm just a perpetual lifelong designer, and that I'm probably best suited to continue being that and doing that and continue refining and honing my skills with it. I know too much about it to not offer it as a service, and I've established myself in some circles. So to me, it's just kind of like one of these things where I've had a love-hate relationship with it for such a long time. But I'm in a place now where I actually like really, really appreciate the fact that that is what I'm able to do for people and for clients and everything. Um, but what's been amazing is over the last couple of years, ever since I started talking about it here and elsewhere, I've had a number of clients or a number of people reach out who know me through symbolic studies, who now want design work, who want me to design their logo, their website, whatever it might be. And I have to say that this is pretty much almost entirely replaced my entire client list. And so on a daily basis, I'm working with people who know me through symbolic studies pretty much, right? And that has been just amazing because I can actually be myself. I can talk about symbolism. I can talk about my opinion on things. And I feel like beforehand, when I was doing design work for, kind of strangers essentially, but who had businesses, I felt like I really needed to keep a huge part of myself hidden from them. And that is less and less the case these days. And so if I work with you or I've worked with you, thank you so much. I easily have the coolest clients I've ever worked with right now, for sure, like hands down. And so to me, that's been a huge change over the last year of just seeing more and more people sort of come through that way. And this has been very fulfilling for me as well, because it feels more like a true sort of, happy medium with a work-life balance. I would at least rather work with people that I really respect and I admire and who know something about my life online, right? And so to me, that's kind of a huge thing that I wanted to bring up as well. Just reflecting over the last year of sort of milestones or what have you. That's something that comes to mind as well. And related to that too, just in terms of life path stuff, I've really come to the conclusion as well that symbolism really is like what I'm meant to sort of speak on and what I'm meant to put out into the world and what I'm meant to continue studying and mentoring on. And it's just one of these things where it really, really fills my cup. And so that's why I talk about it. Symbolism fills my cup in a way that very few things actually do. And so I would say the first handful of years with symbolic studies definitely was kind of, I was doing it and I was happy with it. And I wanted to put out videos and presentations and things like that. But now that I see that it's really become, kind of a life's journey, right? And I had that hunch ahead of time for sure. And design work, I've considered that to be sort of a life's journey sort of thing, or artwork as well, right? But now it's kind of really cemented in stone for me, for sure, that this is what I'm here to do. And not many people come across that in their lives. And one of the things that I just want to mention about that is, I'm really interested in the golden age and what some people might refer to as the primordial tradition, and how people thought, how people lived, what they were up to, during this golden age, when people were more centered, when people were more grounded, when people sort of had this divine connection, right, with source. And one of the things that I've read, and this comes from Rene Guénon, he really speaks about it in a couple of books, very, very well. And essentially, everyone's occupation in the golden age, if you could even call it an occupation, was actually a calling. It was their calling. And so if you were a farmer, that was your calling. If you were a baker, that was your calling. If you were a warrior or a king or a priest or something like that, that was your true calling. And one of the things that he emphasizes is that every occupation, in actuality, every calling is actually kind of a priesthood in its own way, that there's a sacred science behind every single occupation in the traditional world, right? So what you were doing had a sort of rhythm to it, There was symbolism attached to it. There was a sacred science attached to it. So if you were a builder, if you were a carpenter, there was a sacred science to carpentry. So your understanding of wood or your understanding of the tools that you used every day, there was something very, very special about that. And you did not take that lightly. It was very, very serious. And another thing he emphasizes is that to not follow your true calling was actually considered to be the most detrimental thing you could do for yourself and also for society at large, right? And I think that that's really true. And so I think we're living in a world where people are not following their true calling. And arguably, we could be in a much, much better place, right? As a collective. And so for me to be able to finally find what I've been looking for, find that path that really speaks to me, speaks to other people, fills my cup, and certainly has a sacred science to it, symbolism, art, design, it feels really good. And so that's something too that I feel like has just really been kind of solidified over the last year or so. So definitely wanted to mention that. Also wanted to mention the fact that in terms of milestones, that I was able to speak at 2 different conferences, or was invited to speak at 2 different conferences. One actually did not happen because of a hurricane, but I was there nonetheless, and I really appreciate that opportunity to be able to do that. So shout out to Robert Phoenix and Karen B for hosting those events and inviting me to those events and flying me out. And that was really fulfilling as well, because it was the first set of conferences that I was invited to speak at right after my wedding in October. And just being able to converse with people one-on-one in person is so huge. And I was able to do some tarot readings in person, and I do basically a reading every single day or a session every single day. That's sort of my schedule for myself. Is I prefer quality over quantity. That's something that I've come to the realization of over the years. And so I do one tarot session or one private lesson a day, a study session or something like that. And that's where I'm at my best, is just to do one a day. And I do it, of course, online. But being able to do some of these sessions in person was a completely different ballgame. And it was for the best. And we were really able to connect, and we were really able to dive very, very deep. And anytime I've been able to give a presentation in person, a lot of you guys probably don't know this, but the first handful of presentations I ever did, I actually did them in person. So this was before symbolic studies was even a thing. I think one of my first ones that I ever did that I was really excited about was bull symbolism. And so bull symbolism really, really spoke to me. And so I did a presentation in person to a limited audience, but basically my friends pretty much. But there was a handful of people there. And I'll just say that the tone, the sort of calmness in a lot of ways that I feel, and sort of the rhythm I'm able to get into in person, to me sort of far exceeds what I'm able to do online when I'm just looking at myself, in the camera. So being able to speak about symbolism and to have a presentation that I was really proud of, and to be able to deliver that in person was absolutely massive. So definitely that is something I'm interested in doing more and more. So that filled my cup, and then some. Again, just having that real interaction with an audience and being able to really read the room and sort of feel the room and feel the energetics of a room. There's really no substitute for that, in my opinion. So I'm happy to do presentations and interviews and everything online, but I really want to put it out there that I would love to do more stuff in person with people. And who knows, this might even one day turn into something that I decide to take upon myself and either interview people in person, which I've done before, but it was years and years and years ago, or perhaps put on some sort of event, and I'll take this back. I have done classes in person since these conferences, but going out of state and all of that to do that versus maybe a smaller sort of class, local class or whatever, it still feels very, very different, right? But I would love to either, yeah, put something on at some point down the road. I know there's a few people sort of in my sphere. They're talking about maybe doing something like that. I'm more than happy to travel. I hope to travel more with symbolic studies. Maybe even potentially do a tour or something. I'm very open to these things. Or also too something Michelle and we've talked about this before, but maybe even doing like a symbolic studies trip somewhere, right? Some place that has a lot of symbolism attached to the location, and then really, really dive deep and just kind of make that happen. So I know that's becoming more and more of a thing. Actually, if there's a place that you guys think would be a good location to do something like that, whether it's in the US or outside the country, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. So there are a few locations that kind of come to mind. But if anything sort of pops up for you guys, I'm all ears, because to me, that sounds like a great time. Actually, I'm just going to check the chat and see what people have to say about that. Oh, hey, Emily. Shout out, Emily. In person is my preference as well. Yeah, I mean, there's no substitute, right? Like I was saying, for sure. Someplace symbolic. MS. What does MS have to say? Like in North America or another continent? I'm open, really. To me, it kind of makes sense maybe to do something in North America first before you branch out to another country. But I'm definitely not opposed to branching out and just going somewhere else. Hey, what's up, Slick? Shout out Slick Dissident, Chicago Sears Tower. Um, Hey there, Ronin Experience. What's good? Oh, there you go. Greta says Whidbey Institute on Whidbey Island, Washington. I've always wanted to go to Whidbey Island. Never been. I have a friend who has a connection to that place, and I would love to go at some point. So yeah, if there's something on the West Coast, even, I'm into it. Georgia, right? Okay, so Dawson, the Great Lakes, Appalachia, New Orleans, Mexico City, Zion, Pacific Northwest, of course. That's where I'm located, right? Vanessa V says, I'd visit anywhere in the South. Okay, MS says Montreal or Quebec. Maine, what's up, Jin? How's it going? Jin's awesome, super insightful guy. Love his perspective on things. So yeah, so we'll see what happens, in that regard. But I'm kind of travel deprived in some ways. So pre-COVID, I traveled way more. Post-COVID, there's a few years where we just didn't do it out of convenience, basically. But I'm starting to get the itch. So I want to go places for sure. I know Florida. I have to throw that out there. I know a number of people in Florida now. Shout out Longo, Old World Florida, and Shane, his brother. And I know like other streamers, and for a little while there was like a month or two where almost every other reading, I swear, every other day I was meeting somebody from Florida. That's what it felt like, at least. Not literally, but that's what it felt like. So on a weekly basis, I was definitely meeting one or two people from Florida. And so knowing that I have a little bit of a network out there, I think would be a good time. Obviously, Florida is completely littered with things to see. I've never been. So to me, that would be a lot of fun too. So I'm just keeping things open. And if people are really into it, who knows? Maybe it'll happen sooner than later. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, people have good suggestions here. So that's one thing. The other thing I just have to put out there as well in terms of milestones. For me personally, it was a milestone to be invited on the higher side chats as well last year. And so I had listened to Greg for years. I had an off and on relationship with higher side chats. I think once it really sort of took off early on is when I caught that wave, like a lot of other people. And so it's what I listened to for a good while. And to finally just get an invite and sort of be recognized for your work and to be able to talk about, what you want to talk about and everything else, that was absolutely huge for me personally. And so to me, I can't reflect on the last year without sort of putting that out there as well. And so that was a good experience for a few different reasons. Absolutely. And like I was saying earlier, I really think there's just opportunities in life where you're kind of encouraged to step up to the table, step up to the plate, and bring your best work, bring your best insights if possible, and really just prepare. And so that was definitely one of those opportunities where I felt like I didn't want to squander, this, and I really wanted to put forward sort of my best effort. And so for me, I feel good about that one, and I just feel good about the whole experience, with just being able to speak freely and being able to kind of just reach a new audience. And of course, he's networked with so many people, and so many people listen to the show, that there was a definitive sort of bump, you can say, after that, in terms of people reaching out and, followers and subscribers and whatnot. All right. So those are sort of my birthday milestones for my 40th year. Once again, if you guys have a question at the end, I'll definitely be tackling those after I discuss some Patreon questions that came through. But before all of that happens, I do want to remind you that I did a presentation, or I put out a video rather, the other day, maybe a couple of weeks ago now, week and a half, something like that. And it was on the George Floyd storyline and narrative. And I called it Brick by Brick, George Floyd and the Gemini Ritual. This was in the works ever since the George Floyd situation popped off, right? And so there are so many things with that particular narrative that have to do with Gemini symbolism. And I'm not even putting it out there that I know exactly why this is the case. Some people would refer to it as synchromysticism or what have you. I don't know if it was partially orchestrated, completely organic, or what. All I know is that I was picking up on all of these themes that are really, really wild and way too coincidental, right? As an example, the main theme here is the fact that bricks have a correspondence with Gemini. And that has to do with the fact that during Gemini season is when certain cultures started baking bricks under the sun and started resuming building projects, right? And this is encoded in so many different things. And I feel like I did a pretty good job actually explaining, what that's all about. But as an example, like a really famous, well-known myth that relates to this is Romulus and Remus building the first wall in Rome, brick by brick, stone by stone. And then Romulus would kill Remus at that same wall. And this is echoed in the sun card. You generally see two children in front of a brick wall there, right? So the Babylonians referred to Gemini season as the brick mold for this reason. And then like a month or two ago, I read in one of my books that in ancient Peru, they referred to Gemini as a pile of bricks. And then, of course, with the George Floyd situation, a lot of riot locations, protest locations, mysteriously, these pallets of bricks started showing up, right? And George Floyd was part of a crew called the Brick Boys. And the housing project he grew up in was called the Bricks. You have Steven Jackson, the NBA player, referring to George Floyd as his twin. It happened in a twin city. There's so much. The most famous photo of George Floyd is him in front of a brick wall. The Freemasonic connection with brick and stone symbolism as well, and also Gemini. Personally, I feel like it's one of my best sort of videos that I put out there. It's very different from what I normally do. Just saying, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I think it's interesting, and I think it weaves together a lot of fascinating correspondences. And so I don't even think you need to necessarily be invested in anything related to George Floyd or that whole thing to get something out of it personally. And so it's, I know this is like a sensitive topic too. And I got some messages about that. So I know it's not for everyone, but I think my audience, if you like my perspective and you want to deep dive into Gemini symbolism, check this one out for sure. And also, I just have to say that I don't look for synchronicities, if you want to put it that way, or correspondences in the news or on the world stage, I kind of allow them to come to me now. There are definitely channels where anything, any news story, anything that really gets popular, any sort of headline, they're automatically looking for the occult or esoteric or symbolic correspondences. That's not where I'm at anymore, personally. If I happen to see something, that's a different story. And I've been very surprised with just following the signs using the tropical schedule, how many times an event on the world stage really echoes what is symbolically encoded esoterically with that sign. It's happened time and time and time again. And again, I don't necessarily look for it. It comes to me. Sometimes they fall into my lap. And it's not necessarily even what I speak on, right? My channel isn't really about that. But when something is so kind of massively loaded like that, or multi-layered or multifaceted or what have you, if it's too hard to ignore, that's when I have the itch to sort of present it. And so this was something that had been baking for a while, right? And also, I think I did a pretty good job explaining my case, and there's still stuff I didn't talk about because I felt like it just would have made it too long, and I feel like it just would have been a bit much. And so I could easily do a part 2 if I really wanted to. I don't think that's in the cards necessarily, but there's more to chew on basically with all of this stuff. As an example, there's a huge correspondence. I didn't mention it not even once with 20, from it happening in 2020 to it being a $20 bill. The body cam footage had all sorts of stuff with 20 on it. There's even more stuff, but 20 comes up like multiple times throughout this whole entire thing. And so, for what it's worth, there's just way more that I didn't even present. Right. So I also wanted to mention that we do have the Cancer podcast in the works. We recorded it on Sunday, and we had some really, really excellent voicemails that came through. In fact, I would say that this might be the best set of voicemails that we've received from people. And I think it's a testament to a lot of things, really. But I'm just super grateful for the people who stepped up and delivered something in that regard. I got a comment. It reminds me of this comment that I got the other day. And I think it was on Instagram, but somebody said, "Hey, I found your channel somehow, and I watched some videos, and I went to your comment section, and I was really surprised to see that people weren't sort of like in a frenzy, almost like a satanic panic thing, or people weren't talking about, just things that weren't necessarily on topic, or people were basically focused and considerate, and they were adding to the sort of to the weave. They were adding to the conversation, and they got a lot out of the comment section of just my people who are following me." And he says, "This is one of the best comment sections that I've ever come across when it comes to symbolism." And so I took that as a huge compliment. And I think that there's something to be said about that. Symbolic Studies has been able to attract a lot of quality people, really, really high quality people. So people who I don't know are submitting voicemails, and they're like killer voicemails. They're really, really insightful and very, very interesting too. And so one of the biggest gifts, I'll say, has been creating this channel and how much it's really given back to me. It's called Symbolic Studies for a reason. I'm a perpetual student. I will always be a perpetual student. And so, I feel as though I'm just really lucky to have created this platform for some people, and people are now leveling me up in what they're sending me, whether it's, links and book recommendations, or, voicemails, right? So just wanted to mention the fact that I really have a huge appreciation for my audience, right? And I think that it's being sort of seen, or this is kind of really easy to see in these podcasts, basically, right? And that's really what I wanted to do with the podcast, is highlight other people's voices. And so it took me a while to figure out like what kind of podcast I wanted. I felt like I knew I needed to do one, or I wanted to do one. And the thing that made the most sense that I sat on for months was highlight other people's voices, highlight other people's insights, allow people a space to talk about some of this stuff. And I'm so glad I did. And so I think you guys are really going to like this episode for sure. So that's coming out on Friday. If you want to listen to it when it first comes out, you have to be a patron or you have to be subscribed on my channel or on my website. So patreon.com/symbolic studies or symbolicstudies.com/secrets. And then you guys will get it immediately. If you're not subscribed, you guys can still listen to it a week later. But really, it's the patrons and supporters, like they make it happen for sure. So if you are a supporter, a patron, thank you so much for doing that. All right, so let's get into Cancer symbolism. There's a couple of things that I really want to talk about with the glyph of Cancer. And it's so interesting when you're doing this sort of schedule, when you're following the signs, and I've been doing this for a number of years now, it's just really fascinating. Every single year, there's like a new layer that sort of gets removed, or there's like a new angle or wrinkle that I'm like exploring with each sign. And for Cancer season this year, what's coming through is actually the glyph of Cancer, and how I'm seeing it in a more unique way than I think I saw it before. And so to me, it makes all the sense in the world to just discuss some of that and see what you guys think, because I think you guys will get something out of it. So let me find my slide here. All right, so there we go. This is the classic 6-9 Cancer glyph, right? And I have to say that some of these insights are years in the making, right? That's how it goes. That's why I think that there are new veils kind of lifted over the years. You explore maybe the basic information, and then over the years, that becomes kind of old hat. And, you just start picking things up that you didn't see, exactly that way years ago. But the Cancer glyph, right? It looks very similar to like a yin yang. That's something that people have mentioned over the years, the classic yin yang symbol, right? The first thing, obviously, is that it looks like it's supposed to be moving. It looks like it's supposed to be spinning. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's basically what I want to talk about is why does it make sense that the 6-9 glyph of Cancer look like it's spinning? And what is this ultimately sort of about? What's it ultimately related to? And when I think of spin, clearly, in this case, as an example, right, I can't not think of the wheel. I can't not think of the Chariot card, which Cancer rules. And so if you're talking about the wheel and you're talking about things that spin, the ultimate correspondence with that, in my opinion, would be the spin of heaven. And so it'd be the wheel of heaven, right? And so the wheel of heaven spins, and the axle would be the world axis, right? Or the axis mundi. And so the point of pivot in the heavens, for the fixed stars at least, would clearly be the pole star, in my opinion. And it looks like maybe I cut out there, so hopefully I'm back. But what I was saying is that there is a northern polar correspondence with spin, right? And so if you're talking about a mill, right, that spins, there's a whole concept of the mill of heaven as well. If you're talking about anything that rotates, right, around an axis, you can't not think of the fixed stars going around the pole star, right? That pole being a symbolic axis between heaven and earth, right? The symbolic bridge between all that is above with all that is below. And so this is really interesting when you consider the fact that Cancer also is the first official sign of summer, right? So the summer solstice is the beginning of Cancer season. So this is when the sun in North America, the northern hemisphere of Earth, the sun is at its apex right? So the longest day of the year where we have the most light is the summer solstice, and then it starts retreating, right? That's interesting as well because the crab is known for retreating. The crab is not known for forward progress. The crab is known for sideways progress and also retreating. And that's very much related to a lot of symbolism associated with being an introvert, right? And so going within, right? Withdrawing. Okay. I'm even thinking as an example as well of the fact that some cultures didn't see a crab, but they saw a turtle, right? And then just think about the turtle, retreating back into its shell. And so the sun is retreating at the summer solstice. So during the winter solstice, the sun is actually making a return. Even though it feels like it's the dead of winter, the sun is actually returning. So that's the celebration of the summer solstice. In actuality, in traditional symbolism, the winter solstice has been associated with more of a joyous occasion because the sun is returning, and the summer solstice has been viewed in sort of an inverted kind of way, that it's actually there's like a sorrowful kind of dynamic with that, with the sun actually sort of going away. It's been said as well that this is actually encoded with the laugh and crying masks that you'll see like in theater, right? And that those masks actually relate to Janus as well, right? The two-faced Janus, right? And so this relates as well to the John who weeps and the John who laughs, I believe. And so the sun is descending at the summer solstice, not unlike a crab, and the sun is ascending at the winter solstice, right? And this makes sense too with the goat, right? So the sea goat, right? The sign of the summer solstice, the goat climbs. The goat is a magnificent climber. That's what it does. It climbs up the mountain, right? The crab retreats. So I bring this up because in traditional symbolism, the solstices have actually been viewed, and there's a number of ways of looking at this. And I've gotten comments about this over the years, about the dynamic of the polarity between the winter solstice and summer solstice, right? And I'll just say that in traditional symbolism, and this makes all the sense in the world, that the symbol that makes the most sense that represents the axis between the two is actually a pole. And so the solstices and the equinoxes have been viewed as poles. And in actuality, all of the pairs of the zodiac, if there's 6 pairs, right, they're all poles, right? And so this fits right in line with my sort of perspective on symbolism that's more primordial, is that so much of symbolism really truly does go back to poles and holes, right? I've been saying that for years and years and years. And so the solstice is a pole, right? Between the solstices, right? And so we're dealing with the signs of polarity. So polarity, the pole. And there's so much symbolism associating Cancer with being the apex of a system. And so you guys have probably seen, if you haven't, I really suggest you do, but my video on Freemasonry and the Royal Arch. And so in Royal Arch Freemasonry, it's not uncommon to see the twin pillars with the arch that spans between them, right? And in the middle of the arch, you have the keystone, right? You have that stone that looks like a wedge. It's not uncommon for that wedge to literally have the Cancer glyph on it, right? And so whenever you're dealing with an arch, you're basically dealing with dome symbolism. You're essentially alluding to the heavens. This is a classic correspondence that the heavens or heaven has been viewed as more dome-like, as more of a sphere. Even the circular nature of the symbolism of the circle has also been attached to the heavens. And Earth has been more so viewed as a square or as a cube, right? The number 4 comes to mind, the idea of there being 4 corners of Earth, the 4 winds, etc. So when you're dealing with the arch, you're dealing with a heavenly sort of idea or concept. This really plays into domes like in mosques and in cathedrals and things like that, right? And so generally what you're going to see if you're in a place that has a dome in it, like a mosque, that top of the dome, the very top of the dome, a lot of times is intricately detailed. And there's lots of beautiful sort of work around that portion of the dome, right? It's also not uncommon, like in a mosque, to have a chandelier hanging from the very top of the dome. The top of the dome symbolically represents the northern sky. And that hole, the symbolic sort of hole or exit at the top of the dome, is symbolic of this stairway to heaven at the northern sky as well. So if you're within a dome, you can make a clear, easy correspondence between the very top of the dome and the pole star, the North Star, right? And so that wedge on the top of this arch in Freemasonry is symbolic of that. And the Cancer glyph is right there. And so this relates to the idea that people once had, and there's some traditions that still kind of keep this concept alive, that Cancer is the gateway of man, and that Capricorn is the gateway of the gods, and that there is a opening at the top of the dome. And so in these Freemasonic illustrations, it's not uncommon for that wedge or the keystone to actually be removed. And oftentimes you'll have an eye above it, and it's looking down, or it's shining light from its eye, or light in some way is emanating through that hole. And so this is basically referred to as like the exit in the cave. The top of the dome, the top of the arch, the top of the firmament, the top of the apex in the heavens, which would be the northern sky, that there's an opening there symbolically. And traditionally, people have mentioned this over and over and over and over, and it's encoded in so many different things, right? And so there is a symbolic pole, right? There's a symbolic pole that exists there. And so when you're looking at a dome, that can be imagined. And when you're looking at the two pillars with the arch spanning from one to the other, that could also be imagined. There's a third pillar, which is actually the first pillar. It's primordial. One pillar is lunar, one pillar is solar, the other pillar is actually polar. That's the whole entire framework here. That's the whole entire dynamic, right? And if you've been following my work, you know that I'm really like passionate about all this stuff. And so if Cancer exists at the end of a symbolic pole, because we're dealing with the solstice points, this polarity that exists between Cancer and Capricorn, it makes all the sense in the world that Cancer, the glyph, would be spinning. It's spinning just like the wheel of heaven, basically. And I feel like things were going there already, but I have to give a shout out to Slick Dissident, who was at least in the chat earlier, but he's the first person that actually said it. He said, I wonder if the 6-9 glyph is emblematic of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor going around the pole star. And when he said it, I'm like, yes, that's it, dude. You totally got it. I think that that is sort of the thing here. And so that is what I believe you are actually seeing in the 6-9 glyph. You're seeing Ursa Major, which is very close to the pole star, and Ursa Minor, which literally has a star that is the North Star, Polaris, going around that axis point in the heavens, right? And so, as I said, all spin on a deep esoteric level relates to kind of the spin of life or the spin of the cosmos, if you want to put it that way. My personal opinion, people are free to disagree here. I don't think Earth is spinning. I don't think we're moving. I think Earth is stationary. I think it's perpetually idle. And I think that it's the heavens that are rotating above us, right? And so this is how ancient people saw it. Pretty convinced of that too. This is more related to like ancient cosmology, right? And the idea was that everything is spinning around this central interstellar axis that connects all that is above with all that is below. Once again, my opinion is that there are realms above and below, and they're all connected through their center, right? And so it's the axle of the wheel, it's the center of the wheel. That's the most holistic part of the wheel. This is the place of non-duality. It's the external part of the wheel that is related to multiplicity. It's related to division. So the idea is to go inward, right? That is sort of how you do the real work here, is by going within, in my opinion. Know thyself and you'll know the universe, right? It's about that inner alchemy. And so you want to go to the still point within. When you go to the still point within, you symbolically become what's been referred to as the unmoved mover or the prime mover. You cause the wheel to spin by being immutable and stationary, right? This is what's being conveyed in the Chariot card. The Chariot card is so interesting. When you look at older versions of the Chariot card, the Chariot's not going anywhere. That's sort of one of the big secrets of this card, is that it's not moving. You'll see it in newer decks, that newer decks will show the Chariot moving, but you're actually losing an aspect that's really important here, an esoteric aspect. So I'm not surprised that it's gotten lost over time. But the idea is that the charioteer is actually not moving. In fact, he's infused in cubic stone, basically. That's what you're going to see in a lot of the cards, like the Rider-Waite version, right? So he is the unmoved mover. Everything about the crab, once again, is about retreating. It's about going inward, in my opinion. And that's how you really make the wheel turn. And so you'll see Buddha meditating in the middle of a wheel, right? As an example. And you'll see other deities essentially doing the same thing, right? And so to me, the 6-9 glyph, it does make sense that it is Ursa Major and Ursa Minor revolving around the pole star. Cancer is at the end from our perspective on that pole. So there's an axial dynamic going on there. When you're dealing with the pole or you're dealing with the center, you're dealing with axial symbolism. So traditional symbolism could also be called, in my opinion, axial symbolism. And so you're dealing with the point of pivot, right? And so this is all very interesting as well, because what direction does it look like the 6-9 glyph is supposed to be revolving? It looks to me, and to me this seems like very obvious, that it's supposed to be moving around in a counterclockwise direction, right? Counterclockwise, which opposes, of course, a clockwise direction. And so I've talked about this before in other presentations, but the counterclockwise rotation is emblematic of a polar rotation, and the solar rotation is clockwise. So what does that mean, and how is this important, and how does this make any sense, right? Well, there's a lot of rituals that exist in the world where people circumambulate a point of pivot. As an example, I was just watching a really great documentary called The Wheel of Life by Werner Herzog. And I might do a Werner Herzog presentation at some point. He's amazing. And I'm finding that I'm really leaning towards documentaries these days and everything else. But he's talking about this Buddhist tradition that has to do with wheel symbolism, and it has to do with this pilgrimage to one of their holiest lands, which has a tree. And then he also talks about another holy land of theirs, another pilgrimage location rather, with Mount Kailash, right? And that Mount Kailash basically is an old mountain that was considered to be a mountain that bridged heaven and earth, right? And so what people do is they go to Mount Kailash, however many years, I can't remember, the sort of schedule that they have, but every so many years, there's a huge, massive pilgrimage, a congregation at this mountain, and it's followed by a series of, kind of ritualistic acts or what have you. And one of them is to circumambulate the mountain, to go around the mountain. And this is like no easy feat. This took a lot of work. It's dangerous. It's really high elevation, but this is their tradition. This is what they do. And there's a lot of cultures that do that. They have this circumambulation ritual, whether it's around a tree, a mound, a temple, whatever it might be. The Kaaba cube, I've talked about many, many times now, right, in Mecca. And most of the people were going in a clockwise direction, right? They're going clockwise around the mountain. And this took them multiple days. I can't remember how long it takes them, but it's a whole big journey, right? Because this mountain is massive. And so they would go in a clockwise direction. And when he was showing all these people, hundreds and hundreds of people going around in a clockwise direction, the first thing I thought of was, oh, well, I wonder if this is a modern spin on the tradition. And I wondered if people actually went in a counter direction, in a counter clockwise direction. And sure enough, there were people, very few of them, that actually do just that. They actually go against the stream and they go in the complete opposite direction, right? And he says that these people are part of a much older sect of Buddhists that do this. And I'm like, well, that makes all the perfect sense in the world to me, because we went through this massive shift from polar symbolism to solar symbolism, right? And so if you look at a standard clock, you'll see that the hands go in a solar direction, because in the modern world, we're living in a polar age of sorts, right? Solar age with solar symbolism, right? The clockwise direction is expansive, not unlike the rays of the sun, in my opinion. And so when you're going in the clockwise direction, that's a solar direction that's more expansive. When you're going counterclockwise, that actually is more contracting. You're actually getting closer to the center. You're getting closer to the pole, right? And Rene Guénon talks about this very clearly, exactly like how I'm trying to speak today and just show you today that this is the deal, right? So why does this matter? Because the Cancer glyph is going in a counterclockwise direction. And so basically, this is more contractive. To me, this relates to crab symbolism. This relates to doing that inner work, right? And also, I just have to say as well that the fixed stars go in this same direction. So this is how Ursa Major and Minor goes around the pole star. It's counterclockwise, not clockwise. The sun goes in a clockwise direction, right? Polar symbolism is all about that counterclockwise rotation. So that's kind of how I see it, is that this glyph actually is very northern and polar and very axial. And the fact that it's also counterclockwise is super, super interesting. And actually, it's kind of interesting as well, because I want to know, if anyone out there knows, please share what you know. Please share your insights. But a patron reached out and they wanted me to answer some questions, or they basically wanted to pick my brain, I guess, on the symbolism of the Korean flag. And so in the Korean flag, there's the yin yang glyph, and it's structured just like this. What rotation does this look like? What rotation is it? It's a counterclockwise rotation, right? But if you just Google yin yang, you will see clockwise versions of this, right? Where it's just basically flipped. I'm inclined to think, based on all of my research, that this is actually the real setup here, is that it's supposed to go counterclockwise. It's more of a modern thing to flip the dynamic with everything. So let's just get into it. So they wanted to know my perspective here on the Korean flag. And there's a few things I'll get off my chest with it, right? And the first is that rotation of the yin yang, going counterclockwise. Very primordial, very polar, very, very traditional. I would say that the clockwise rotation would be more modern, would be more solar, right? Well, obviously, we have trigrams around this central yin yang. And so that to me is very interesting as well, for a few different reasons. And the main reason comes from actually this book right here that I've talked about before. I went on this buying spree. I kind of do it every once in a while. So this book is Galactic Alignment by this guy named John Major Jenkins. My understanding is this guy's not with us anymore, but that he had some really interesting insights about things. And we don't have like the same perspective on things. So we come from different camps, philosophical camps, or whatever you want to say. But one of the things he mentions in this book is so intriguing, and it plays right into everything I'm trying to explain to you right now. In his book, he basically says that the ancient Chinese people had a northern cosmology, a northern reverence, and just like the rest of the world, they had a reverence for the northern sky. And their early zodiac was basically in the northern sky, and they had 8 constellations around the North Star. And these 8 constellations had a correspondence with the 8 trigrams of the I Ching. And if you don't know this system, there's 8 trigrams. Each trigram is made up of 3 different lines, either a complete unbroken line, which is yang, or an unbroken line, either a complete unbroken line, which is yang, or a broken line, which is yin, right? And so just 3 lines, and you can see that they're all indicated right here, the 8 trigrams. These 8 trigrams can be combined, and you will get 64 hexagrams that have 6 lines, right? And so 8 times 8, 64. There's 64 squares on a chessboard. The number 64 is super interesting for a few reasons, but this is basically binary math, right? You can put it that way. And so these 8 trigrams, these 8 constellations in the northern sky, that was their zodiac. And I'm getting ready to do a presentation at some point. I've been working on it for a while, called On the Origins of the Zodiac. And I think that this storyline speaks to, perhaps, more than likely, actually, all of the origin stories of all of the signs in the zodiac. And so when the Chinese people were more polar in nature, he says, according to his book, from what I recall, he says this was like 5,000 years ago. He says they had these 8 constellations in the northern sky. And then as they became more solar over time, what happened was people started focusing on the path of the sun. And the path of the sun became more significant, right? The ecliptic. What they did was they took the 8 constellations in the northern sky and shifted them to the path of the sun. And then they added 4 more constellations, giving them 12 constellations of the modern zodiac, right? And so there's a northern correspondence, in my opinion, to the trigrams themselves. And as I mentioned, the yin yang clearly to me has a northern correspondence. It's the spin of heaven, right? And it's counterclockwise, so it's the fixed stars going around the pole star. In my opinion, it's emblematic of that kind of spin. And this is kind of an echo, in my opinion, of this earlier sort of framework with the trigrams, right? Well, this is super fascinating to me because Julian, the person who submitted this question or wanted to know more about my opinion on the Korean flag, they included this quote here about the Korean creation myth. So please forgive me. I'm going to butcher some of these names, but this is really, really worth reading, right? The Dangun myth is the Korean foundation myth about the creation of the first Korean kingdom. It tells the story of a son, the Lord of Heaven, who descends to earth with 3,000 followers and establishes a kingdom. A bear and a tiger seeking to become human are given a test to only eat garlic and mugwort, which I love that. I want to know more about that. And stay in a cave out of the sunlight for 100 days. The tiger fails, but the bear endures. After succeeding, 21 days pass, and the bear transforms into a woman. She marries this son and gives birth to Dangun, who becomes the founder of this place, right? And I'm just bypassing all of those names because it's not worth it for me to go there. The myth also reflects the reverence for bears and the concept of uniting celestial and earthly powers in Korean culture. Whoa. When I read that, it kind of blew my mind, if I'm being honest. Because when we're dealing with Ursa Major and Minor going around the pole star, we are dealing with the Great Bear and the Little Bear, right? And so it fits right in line with that. Everything that I've come to understand is that the bear is the primordial sort of totem animal for a lot of cultures. So that doesn't surprise me at all. it was considered to be the superior animal. And I know that some cultures saw the bear not as just a king, but also a warrior and also a shaman. So there's this deep spiritual aspect to bear symbolism, right? And I've been trying to finish this book. It's taken me a while, not because it's hard to read or anything, but I've just been reading other stuff. I have a book called The Bear, and it's all about the bear symbolically being dethroned, especially in Europe and Northern Europe. And believe it or not, it's really fascinating. This author talks about how there's a rift in academia and how a lot of professors and researchers and authors and whatnot, they don't want to acknowledge, this is the old guard. The old guard does not want to acknowledge the significance of bear symbolism and bear totems and like bear religions and things like that. And the new guard is like, what are you talking about? How can we ignore this? There's too much information here that this needs to be sort of discussed. And the author also discusses the fact that there was a strategic campaign to replace bear reverence with lion reverence. So basically, replace the bear with a solar icon, replace the bear with a solar animal to people who had no lions around. But it was successful, and the church was able to make their point. And before you knew it, people were more and more and more solar. And so Ursa Major and Minor, right? The great bear and the little bear. So to me, this speaks to everything that I'm trying to talk about here. That the bear has a huge correspondence with Northern polar primordial traditional symbolism. And Rene Guénon actually has an article called The Bear and the Boar, if I'm not mistaken. And he talks about the shift, how some animals or some cultures from the Eastern world, they actually saw a boar as Ursa Major. And oftentimes my understanding is it was a black boar, it was a black pig, and or piglets as well, 7 piglets. And over time, as this myth or what have you transferred further west, it got turned into a bear. So you can almost see how boar to bear basically was a thing. And also, he says that there's words that still encode this, like Hyperborea, right? Beyond the north wind, right? This northern mythical land, Hyperborea. Boar is right there, and it's a northern sort of thing. So that's my take on the Korean flag. I think there's a lot of northern polar symbolism baked into it. And really, this is, I'm realizing that this is part of my path, is to really continue to unpack northern polar symbolism, because it's actually more fundamental. And so it's more fundamental than solar symbolism and lunar symbolism. It's so fundamental and so basic that it is lost in today's world. But I see it that people are becoming more and more interested in it. So I want to be someone that helps facilitate, these conversations and whatnot. Rene Guénon, he says it here in his excellent book, Fundamental Symbols. He says, it goes without saying that these two symbolisms, polar and solar, must never be confused, and that we have often indicated, polar symbolism is far more fundamental, and it is truly primordial. So there you have it. All right. So what shall we do from here? Let me check out the chat actually real quick before I move on to anything else. Okay, so JKC, I think of bull versus bear markets. People project their thought and ideas onto the things that are near them, which is why the metaphors correspond with the animals and things around them. Let's see. Crazy because bears have a lot of lunar associations. Yeah. I'll just say it. My personal opinion, a lot perhaps all symbolism that is lunar and solar originates from polar, and that there is a real hierarchy here. And this is what traditional symbolism has taught me. The same way there's a real, when you're looking at the pyramid, there's a real hierarchy. There's a tippy top, apex. Same thing with the wheel. There's a center there that is truly transcendental. And so there's a hierarchy with that system as well. This is the hierarchy. That polar symbolism is the primordial, earliest sort of symbolic framework. And then after that, we got these other symbolic things, which is why it's so hard to parse out what's what, in my opinion. Because there's so much with solar symbolism that is actually very polar. And so if you look at my presentation called The Rising Sun, I get into some of this stuff. Right. Gotcha. All right, so I'm just cruising through some of this stuff. Hopefully you guys got something out of that. And thanks again for hanging around. Right. Okay. So what to do from here? Well, I think I'm going to go through just a couple of plugs, and then I will get to your guys' questions. So if you have a question, feel free and throw it out there, and I'll get to it in just a few minutes. One of the things I wanted to mention as well, since I'm here, and I really like the way it came out, I'm going to be doing another silent auction. So not sure if you guys saw it at all, but a couple of months ago, I did a silent auction. I did my first one, and I auctioned off a unique Aries print. And so I have several prints around. I did the first 3 signs. I would love to get around to all the signs. I'm going to get around to all the signs, but it's proving to be something that's going to take a while, and I want to do it right. But I did this Aries piece, and I included charcoal sort of shadowing that I did by hand. It looks beautiful in my opinion. It really kind of added a whole nother layer to the poster, and someone bought it. And I also gave away a session with it. I included an original rough draft of the Aries print that I signed. I did a few things, with that. I'm going to do it again. And I have the piece here for Taurus, and I think it came out pretty good. And I think that more people are going to be interested in this one because my Aries print, it kind of looks, it's a little intense, I'll say. The Mars energy comes through. There's more of a warlike, aggressive sort of thing with it, right? But this one is more pleasant on the eyes, in my opinion. And it ended up working out really nicely because the person who ended up buying it and getting this session, we're now collaborating on artwork and all sorts of things. So it ended up being like a really, really fruitful sort of thing for me to do. But here is the Taurus print. So not sure if my camera is going to highlight sort of the charcoal there, but there it is. So this is essentially a one of a kind, because I did all of this by hand. And the print, I got it silk screened by hand by this guy named Gary Houston in Portland, Oregon. And all of the little highlights that you see in the print, that was all done by hand. So this exact one is going to be shipped to someone who wins the silent auction. So I'm going to probably launch that sometime next week, definitely sometime in July. I'm not really in a huge rush to do that personally, but that's on the horizon for sure. Also, just want to mention as well, regarding art and design and logo work and everything, if that's something you're interested in, you can go to my website, and I have an art and design link there, and you can actually check out my portfolio. So you can see other logos that I've done for clients. You can see some of the packaging I've done for clients. You can see, just a little bit of what I'm able to do. I consider myself to be something of a chameleon when it comes to design. And so I've done really clean stuff for corporate clients. I've done really gnarly dark stuff for bands and whatnot. And so I kind of pride myself in a way of being kind of mercurial when it comes to my artwork and things like that. And I'm kind of just like that in general. I'm a very fluid, sort of watery person that way. So if you have a project that you're working on, or if you're interested in collaborating, just reach out. So that's symbolicstudies.com in case you weren't aware. Also, I am available for tarot readings and private lessons, study sessions, consultations, things like that. And so, like I said, I generally just do one a day. That's my max. That's when I'm at my best. So I am booked out for a little while. But if you want something, say like in August, there's plenty of availability, in August to get that going. If you're interested, you can book right on my site as well. And then I'll reach out with a date and we'll make it happen. And I'll just say that because I've been doing it for a while now, I mean, I feel as though my readings are getting better and better. And I feel as though that I'm kind of leveling up in that regard for sure. Also, Patreon. So patreon.com/symbolic studies. If you guys want to support the channel, this gives you access to podcasts a week early. And then it also gives you access to symbolic secrets. So I am 14 or 15 episodes deep with symbolic secrets. And so I literally have an hour-long presentation full of slides, generally between like, I don't know, 40 to 60 slides each presentation, right? An hour long. And it's my most deep divey, weavy information about every single card at the moment in the major arcana. And so I'm covering the major arcana right now. I released my last episode was on the temperance card. And so literally just with that, including the Fool, that's like 15 hours worth of content. And sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes I feel like it's interesting when you do stuff on Patreon. I do get comments from people, I do get feedback from people, but it's very different from putting it on YouTube, obviously. So sometimes I put a lot of effort and work into these presentations, and then it's kind of like crickets. Like I don't hear much from people about it. I'm proud of the work. I think it's excellent work. I think it's really, really good stuff. And so I sometimes feel like I'm not putting out enough stuff, but then I realize that I just spent the last 2 weeks putting together a presentation on temperance or the hangman or something like that. But because it's behind a paywall, not that many people see it. So if you want kind of like a taste of what that's all about, I have released 1 or 2 free episodes on my channel. And I think I might release the chariot card episode for free too, because it is Cancer season. And I feel like I did a lot of good stuff in that one as well. But you get one of those episodes a month, and it's exclusively just for patrons and supporters. So you're not going to really find that anywhere else. So if you're interested, again, patreon.com/symbolic studies or symbolicstudies.com/secrets. And it's the exact same thing. You're getting the exact same thing. And also too, just like today, Julian, who proposed the Korean flag thing, who also sent me that myth, and they actually sent me a lot of cool stuff about that. They're patrons. So if I do these live streams more, I think I'm going to prioritize patron questions and things like that. All right. So with all of that out of the way, I am ready to hang out in the chat, answer some questions, and see what's going on in that regard, and hang out for a little while longer here. Yes, Hoop Daddy 7. Looks like you have the Pleiades in there too. Yep, exactly. That was the original inspiration. If you're interested in Pleiadian symbolism, please check out my presentation called The Pleiadians. And I talk about how Pleiadian symbolism and mythology comes from the northern sky. And I think I make a pretty good case for that as well, that the original 7 stars of enlightenment is Ursa Major, basically, right? But yeah, that's a good one. I also include with these posters a symbolic breakdown sheet. So maybe I'll just show you that real quick. So these are sort of the extras that you get. I've got a bookmark here, right? It's like a correspondence sheet, essentially. I'm including a original draft illustration of the print. You can see it's different than the actual print itself. And I'm very proud of this Symbolic Studies draft stamp there. So there's a draft stamp. It's been signed. It has my notes. I'm kind of like an archivist with my own work, I guess. So I keep all of these things around, and I just have like dozens of these illustrations as I was working through the artwork. And so I include that as well, which is pretty cool in my opinion. I include an elemental study packet as well. So I've got 4 sheets that relate to elemental symbolism. Conveniently, the one up front is the one for water, and there's correspondences and things like that. These were originally designed in 2022. And since then, I've been working on an expanded version. And hopefully this year I release the new version because it is like twice as big. And it's pretty cool, at least in my opinion, with some of the stuff I was able to include in there. I also include, of course, guys, I have to, a polar symbolism sheet. You can get this for free on my website. Just click the link at the top. And I include 27 books that relate to polar symbolism. So don't take my word for it that it's important. Read this material and read these authors and read these quotes, and you'll see what I'm saying, right? And I have, I believe, all of these books physically. I think there's like 2 or 3 that maybe I have on PDF, but the vast majority of these books I actually have in my possession. Also, so this is it. This is the symbolic breakdown sheet. So I literally go through everything on the print and I talk about, to me at least, what it means symbolically. And I also have like associated symbols right here, related symbols and whatnot. So if you want to know, hey, why did you include a Taurus field in the Taurus print? I explained that. Or why did you include 2 stars, near her hands? I talk about what that's all about. So that's pretty cool, the fact that I include that, at least in my opinion. So you get a nice little package, actually. All right. So thank you, my dear. Appreciate it. Crispy chicken. Slick, many thanks, man. That's awesome. Glad you like it. Oh, there we go. Cyanide pilled. Incredibly important subject matter. Complete understanding of the bears of the sky must be had. I know. One of the things that I really want to do, I will do a bear symbolic breakdown video or presentation at some point. It needs to be done for sure. And I have such a huge reverence for them now. Actually, I would love to show you guys something else since we're here and just hanging out. So I guess, what do you want to call them? A student of mine, someone that I've been doing sessions with for over a year now. I'm sure she doesn't mind being named, but this student really has been very, very cool to work with. Their insights and understanding and their development symbolically is really, really, it's getting to be very advanced, in my opinion. And at first, it began with talking about the signs of astrology, and she was doing an art project. She knows who she is. She was doing an art project, and I was helping her with this art project in encoding symbolic value into her paintings, right? And over the months and over the year, she basically learned that I have a reverence for bear symbolism, of course. And she created this little statue, hand-carved statue of a bear for me. And I just recently got this, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. But she did an amazing job with it, right? First sort of stab at doing a hand-carved bear. And there's a whole thing with bears that are standing versus bears that are on all fours. That's one thing that's mentioned in that book, is that during this reverence of the bear, they were generally viewed as standing, which puts them in touch with the divine. There's a vertical orientation there versus being horizontal, which is what we see nowadays, like on the California flag or whatever. And so she understood that, and she created this for me. So this is definitely treasured, and I think it's amazing, amazing stuff. And so I love this. And yeah, I would love to dive into all things related to the bear, for sure. Hey there, Moscow. Many thanks. I appreciate that. All right. Slick asks, Mario, did you ceremoniously bury that amazing beard in Michelle's garden? I bet it grows a giant beanstalk. I did not. That's hilarious. Yeah, with the summer months here, I decided to kind of whittle it down a little bit. So this is recent work right here. Lacey Hawk, thanks. These are so cool. That art is crazy. I love how happy and proud you are of your work. Yeah, I am happy and proud of it, for sure. It's been a long time sort of in the making. Many thanks, dude. The Garza library is primo material. Shout out to the polar bears. Yep. Garsh Brooks, that's sick. Thank you. D Zerta, that's beautiful. Appreciate it. Nice. Awesome. I'm going to include a couple of links right here for you guys, should you be interested. So we've got the Patreon link, patreon.com/symbolic studies. And then also I'm going to include basically my membership section on my website, symbolicstudies.com/secrets. Oh, interesting. Us Micmacs say a bear on its back is invisible. That's interesting. Yeah, that's going to be a deep, deep weave for sure. Oh, right on. I did not see that. Dude, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate that. That's awesome. Apologies if any others came through and I didn't see them. Well, if there's no questions, I am going to enjoy the rest of my evening with my wife. If I missed something, please let me know. But you know what I'm realizing too, when it comes to questions and whatnot, now that I've done a ton of podcasts and whatever, I am someone that is much, much better at reading a question, having my own time to sit with it, and then reply to it. And so that's what I encouraged on Patreon, is that people ask me a question, give me a day or two to kind of stew on it, and then I have a much, much better response. I do the same thing with my students as well. People are more than welcome to ask any question off the cuff, but so many times, if I get a question randomly and then I answer it, once the call's done, I'm like, oh, I forgot to mention this. I forgot to say that. This is pretty important with that as well. And so you're better suited just sending it to me, ahead of time, and then I can answer it on something like this. And so I think that's definitely my personality type for sure. Okay, so let's see here. Tennis, surf, skate, bourbon, solstice. Because you're a guy, presumably in touch with the emotions, being a Cancer, if you encourage a younger version of yourself about growing emotionally into as a man, any man, grow emo rights of passive. Okay, gotcha. So I think I understand the question. So what recommendation would I have with my younger self regarding the emotions? I would say, man, there's a lot of things that could be said. Let it flow. That I have an understanding now that the emotions, they're very mysterious, and so I think women have women have more of a relationship with their emotions than man, in my opinion. It just makes sense biologically. And I think that a lot of men are afraid of their emotions because they don't understand them. And so I would say, do not be afraid of your emotions, and allowing it to flow is so, so valuable. And allowing to feel is very, very valuable. And do not suppress your emotions. Do not stuff them down, right? This can lead to serious ailments. It can lead to serious issues, right? So I think what's going on is, in today's world, people over intellectualize everything. People want to live in their head 24/7, and they want to do math in their mind 24/7, but they don't want to address matters relating to the heart, right? In my opinion, I talk about polar symbolism and northern symbolism so much. Polar wisdom has a lot to do with the heart as your sacred center, as your holy of holies, basically, right? And so the heart is the seat of your spiritual impulse. And so you don't want to deny matters related to the heart, nor do you want to deny matters related to the mind, right? But I would say that between heart and mind, you really, I mean, what can you say? I think you want to have a healthy balance between the two. So you don't want to pursue just matters only related to the heart and you're not using your reason and logic and everything else. Vice versa, you don't want to live just in your head and only use reason and logic and pretend as though your heart or your emotions like don't exist, which to me basically is kind of like saying that you're ignoring the spiritual realm or the spiritual impulse pretty much. Your heart is really there's a symbolic thread that exists, between your heart and I would say the center of all things, the source, basically, right? And so just to not be afraid of it would be one of my biggest sort of things to kind of tell people and to not suppress it, because I see that a lot of people, especially men, really do suppress their emotions. And so that's the first thing that sort of comes to mind for me personally. And so when you're in touch with that and in tune with that, I think a lot of things open up for you. And I see that actually a lot of people today talk about mental issues and talk about having some sort of mental illness or whatever. And I see it that actually, I feel like this is almost kind of like, misdirection in a way of sorts, that there's a lot of people that don't have mental issues. They have emotional issues. So the way I would put it is, I think as humans, we filter things through our emotional body first, that you're going to feel something before you kind of mentally, analytically kind of analyze it. And so I think a lot of people, they have issues with their heartstrings. I think that they have issues with trauma, and I think that they have emotional issues, but mentally they're just fine, actually. And so I almost kind of want the conversation to shift a little bit from mental illness, mental health awareness, mental health. That's what I was looking for. I think more people are dealing with emotional health issues, not mental health issues. That's just kind of my armchair take on it. Okay, right on. Thank you. Do you have any recommendations on where I can find Andean lunar symbolism? No, if I'm being honest with you, I don't think I have anything in my library that kind of fits the bill personally. But maybe if I look into it, maybe I will have something. Ebony Indigo, thank you. Yeah, it's something that I've even talked to, therapists and psychologists and things like that, and they can pretty much see my point with that. I think mental health has been way, way overblown. It's emotional health. People have more emotional health issues. I realized this when I was watching a lot of interviews with people who are kind of down and out. There's a big YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly, and the host, his name's Mark. He has a studio on Skid Row in LA. And he's talked to a lot of homeless people, prostitutes, pimps, like, all these street people, basically. And so many of these people I saw kind of clearly. I'm like, they would bring up mental health issues and that they need whatever medication to deal with their mental health stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think mental health, there is a thing there for sure. But based on my perspective, from what I know, I'm like, dudes, these guys, most of these people do not have mental health issues. It's pretty clear they have emotional health issues. And these emotional health issues are some of the hardest to deal with, because you're dealing with invisible wounds and traumas and things like that. So that's just how I personally see it. But I'm also a Cancer sun sign, so I'm kind of biased to think that this is probably the case, right? Let's see here. Do you see anything between Cancer, the illness, and spiders? Those words are the same in my language. Super interesting. Yeah, what I've always heard is that the term cancer was applied to it because I guess one of the first maybe X-rays or it predates that. But that when people were looking at cancerous cells, under a microscope, that it kind of looked like a crab or something. And even the other day, I just saw a spider and it had really short legs. and it kind of looked very crab-like, actually, in my opinion. And so even just like the quick sort of like comparison between crab and spider, I kind of see some things going on there. If I thought about it a little bit more, I'm sure there's other things, but interesting, on a lot of levels. I've heard that the spider in some ways could be sort of like the totem animal of the current age, or the age that we're kind of entering into. There's a few people who have different variations on the theme, saying that 8-legged animals are indicative of this current age, whether it's the spider or the octopus. And then I would even say too, a scorpion, because it's an arachnid, right? And so I don't know of any clear sort of storylines. I would not be surprised if there are some. I'll say one of the things I have read with Cancer is in one of my resources somewhere in my library, the author was trying to make the case that basically what predates Cancer, or predates the crab, excuse me, as being related to Cancer, is actually the serpent. And that a lot of ancient primordial serpent symbolism was actually later sort of transferred to the crab and Cancer, the Cancer constellation. And so I think that that's really interesting. And so the crab is very much known for being like an underworld creature, right? Again, the retreating sort of dynamic. There's a nighttime aspect to Cancer, in my opinion, even though it's the first sign of the summer solstice. I even think of just like being underwater and it being cold and dark and all these different types of things. And so like where it lives, out of all the creatures in the zodiac, the crab is the last one that you want to cuddle up with, right? And so there is a dark connotation and a very mysterious connotation with the crab. And I would say the same thing with the spider, that there's a lot of stuff going on there with the spider as well. So even just kind of just generally crab, spider, serpent, you could probably pull out a lot of things from that. Yeah, exactly. Mark Leita, or however it's said. Wonderful, fully inspiring answer. Awesome. Happy to hear that, and your encouragement regarding balance so sync with your Polaris Ursa Major minor insights. Thank you for having answered that question so thoughtfully. Yeah, you got it. No, of course. For sure. What about Leo and Cancer? I'm not sure what you're getting at with that, because there's a lot of stuff. What I found is that there's 12 signs if you're going with the standard system. Personally, guys, I'm not opposed to Ophiuchus. I'm not saying that it makes the most sense on a time sort of level to keep time or track time or anything, but like Ophiuchus has to be acknowledged in some way, shape, or form. So I try and not be dogmatic. Maybe I am in certain ways, but every single sign, right, if you're dealing with 12 signs, has an opposing sign, right? There's that polarity axis with an opposing sign. With Cancer, it's Capricorn. And so I would say also, so that means that there's 6 pairs basically, right? So there's 6 pairs of signs. Each pair is a huge weave. Each pair you can look into like for a long, long time. There's a lot going on there. In fact, in some ways, I've told students, I'm like, hey, if you want to like take your symbolic awareness of the zodiac to the next level, start considering 6 pairs over 12 signs, and you're going to unlock all sorts of stuff, because there's myths that are encoded between these axis points and stuff. Also, each sign has a relationship, a very unique relationship with the sign that precedes it and the sign that comes after. So Cancer has a unique relationship with Gemini, has a unique relationship with Leo, and also has a unique relationship with Capricorn, and then also the other water signs. And all the signs, really, they all have an interesting relationship with each other. Cancer, though, is the only sign ruled by the moon, which is followed by Leo, which is the only sign ruled by the sun. And so a lot of people have kind of made the case that in some ways it's as though Cancer maybe represents the body of a child or of a person, and that there's a lot to be said about that too. There's a number of myths that suggest that Cancer was like the sign of creation, that maybe this whole reality symbolically, if it falls under one main sign, that it could be Cancerian. Conversely, I've also read different myths where it says that if all the planets align in Cancer, or something along that line, something ominous sort of, that this could be the end of the world. So Cancer does have this relationship with like growth and beginnings and with birthing symbolism and pregnancy symbolism. The moon obviously has a huge relationship with all of that stuff, menstruation and whatnot. But what's kind of been said, some people have put forth, just like the gateway of man thing with Cancer, that maybe Cancer is sort of like where a person symbolically gets their body, and then also that Leo is kind of the spirit within that body, something along those lines, right? That's one thing that's kind of said. The demiurge has been associated with the beginning of Leo and the transition from Cancer to Leo as well. And so this is with, I'm going to butcher it, but the heliacal rising of Sirius is at the beginning of Leo, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's an interesting dynamic there that that this god, which in the Gnostic pantheon or the Gnostic creation story, the demiurge is a lion-headed serpent. And there's a huge weave with lion symbolism and feline symbolism and serpentine symbolism as well. This is why the strength card is associated with Teth or Tet in Hebrew, which means serpent, right? And so, so when you're thinking of Leo, there's a huge serpentine connection there. Also, a huge dragon connection there as well. And so the serpent and feline combined is the demiurge, and there's a dragon-like quality to the demiurge as well, I would say, in many respects. So there's a whole epic sort of thing going on between those two signs for sure, because even with Cancer too, I mean, there's a lot of solar symbolism with Cancer. There's a lot of lunar symbolism with Cancer. And I see it now that there's a lot of polar symbolism with Cancer too. But I see more overt lunar qualities because it's ruled by the moon, which is really interesting to have in contrast with the most solar sign, you know, in the zodiac, which would be Leo. Okay, right. Soft white underbelly. Yeah, I totally get it. You know, I take breaks. It's really interesting. There's sometimes where I kind of crave it actually, and I'm like, it gives me, I don't know, it gives me another perspective. It makes me feel very grateful, oftentimes, to be honest with you, just to realize sort of where I'm at and where other people are at and everything else. So, early on, years ago, I used to watch it all the time, and now it's kind of like when I'm in the mood or something like that. Oftentimes I'm listening really late at night while I'm like working on a project or something. But yeah, I totally understand. Hey, Sarah, greetings. Okay, so Ardquark, having followed your work on the three pillars being polar, solar, and lunar, I'm curious about the lunar period in history. I haven't heard much interpretation on it versus the other two. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm still digesting that. Because early on, I used to say that it seems as though to me the lunar period is maybe a transitional period, and that if you're looking at polar qualities and solar qualities, the go-between would be lunar. And in many ways, this kind of reminds me of Mercury. So what I've said about Mercury is that I really now see it that Mercury has a lot of solar symbolism attached to it that you cannot take away. I could do a whole presentation on it. There's a whole polar association with Mercury as well that you cannot deny once you know what you're looking at and once you've done that kind of research. And of course, there's a whole lunar association with Mercury as well. And so, you know, as an example, Thoth or Thoth in ancient Egypt was like a moon god, right? And then even the glyph for Cancer has the horns, you know, on its head. And so I see the best sort of breakdown I can give you right now is if there's polar and solar, and that was the great shift, lunar is like an intermediary go-between traveler between the two. And you're dealing with the moon, which looks like an arc, right? It looks like a boat. So it's like traveling. And Mercury is the traveler. Mercury is the messenger of the gods, goes between these realms and everything else. But I'm kind of hesitant to bring it up until I know more. I feel like earlier on I would bring up more solar age sort of stuff and talk about it like that, like this intermediate sort of thing between these two bigger symbolic ages. And I think I kind of got checked on that for a couple of different reasons. And so I'm a little hesitant to bring it up, but it's an excellent question. And it's something that I do or would like to address at some point. I'll say the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is there are myths around the world that say that there was a time before the moon, and that the moon simply did not exist, right? I have a book back here somewhere called Who Built the Moon? And it gets into some of this stuff, and it gets into all of the anomalies with the moon. And there's a lot of anomalies with the moon. It's so mysterious. This is kind of going back to some of the Cancer Leo thing, but the moon being so receptive and being so feminine, by and large, a lot of cultures see it that way, versus the sun being really projective and being more masculine and everything else, right? But I was talking to Robert Phoenix in a stream, and we were talking about kind of polar lunar stuff, and he knows my take. I did a presentation at his conference about all of this stuff through the lens of Libra. So if you want to see that, actually, it's called the Axis of Libra presentation. I recorded it. And so he brought up this idea of there being no moon, and that there are some cultures that did not have a moon at some point in time. So then the question is, well, where did the moon come from? When did it come here? Some people think it's like man-made, some people, or something made, right? That it was a creation of some sort. Some people say that it was brought here at some point, all these different things. And, one of the things he kind of proposed, and he's just spitballing, but I remember it. He said, if there was a polar sort of tradition, and then now we live in a solar tradition, what if the moon was introduced, taking us away from the polar tradition, transitioning us to the solar tradition, right? Something to be said about that, because it really is, again, I'm just going to say it again, it really feels like it's the intermediary between the two. So maybe there might be a presentation where I did get into that a little bit, but that's just kind of my quick take on that one. Great question, though. Tony Brewer, thank you so much. I appreciate it. The Lynx/Sphinx of Cancer. What does it have to do with Cancer? One of the things that comes to mind with that is the fact that you're generally going to see a Sphinx, two of them, or excuse me. Yeah, what does that have to do with Cancer? Well, yeah, you will. You'll see two Sphinxes in front of the Chariot card, in front of the Chariot itself, rather. And one is white, one is black. Kind of reminds me of yin yang. Kind of reminds me of this perpetual sort of flow of opposites, basically, sort of chasing each other, right? I even think, too, in this regard, almost like the two fish of Pisces. It's not uncommon for the fish to be kind of swimming away from each other, kind of like the glyph of Pisces. But there's a number of pieces of art where the fish are actually revolving around each other, but the Sphinx has so many mysteries to it. It's a whole thing. It's a whole entire thing, right? I mean, even just the fact, too, that what has been said, sort of one of the mysteries of the Sphinx, or the riddles of the Sphinx, is kind of how it's often said, is that it perhaps is the case that the Sphinx has the head of the Virgin and the body of the lion, and that Virgo was once the beginning of the new year in ancient Egypt, and Leo was the last sign of that year. And so with the head of the Virgin and the body of a lion, you actually are in some way kind of encompassing the whole entire zodiac, pretty much. That's one thing that's sort of been said. I know there's people who think that the head of the Sphinx is actually like Anubis, basically, and that it got modified, So yeah, those are just a couple of things off the top of my head that kind of relate. Also, too, with this Leo connection with the Sphinx, potentially, right? You're dealing with the sign that's right after Cancer as well. But I know there's probably people in the comments are going to be writing, excellent stuff with that. So just off the top of my head. All right. Interesting. There you go. In the Analema, Cancer means it's all downhill from here. Could relate to the disease name. Yeah, yeah. That's a good call, dude. Okay. Just looking for more questions here. Good comments, though. Right. What are your thoughts on why they put the Bears in Chicago? Good question, and I have to once again give credit to Slick Dissident. So right here, he's answering it for you, kind of, but he has something else that he mentioned years ago on a stream that I remembered as well. But he says here, Chicago was a mythical promised land to escape slaves, right? Northern escape. That's totally a common thing. Also, too, I'll just say I've learned a lot about nomadic migrations. That's something that I've become very interested in. That's going to be coming up at some point, some sort of presentation or what have you, about agrarian farming sedentary cultures versus nomadic cultures and how they saw things very differently, and how humanity was, it appears as though, exclusively nomadic for a long time. So we can't deny our roots, and we can't not talk about nomadic symbolism. And one of the things that really, just to kind of explain it briefly, but the Gemini twins symbolically represent a nomadic tribe or a nomadic civilization and a agrarian civilization. And basically the dynamic is that when an agrarian society starts building and like establishing a town, it prevents the nomad from being able to travel. So in the Romulus and Remus storyline, Remus gets killed by Romulus for jumping over the wall, for crossing a border, basically, right? And so it's always the case in these hero twin stories, if they are encoding the nomad versus the agrarian kills the nomad. And that is also the case with Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel and establishes the first town, right? But here he says, so what I was going to say, sorry, nomadic migrations, very often, the vast majority of the time I've looked into it and done research, they're always south to north and vice versa migrations. Very rarely is it east to west. It's always north to south. They're usually following the sun, basically. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. And this makes a lot of sense with other patterns that I've recognized with north to south roads and pilgrimage journeys and all sorts of other stuff. But to continue on here with Slick's comment, Chicago is a mythical promised land to escape slaves, follow Polestar to freedom kind of legend. Yeah, exactly. I know Afro diaspora who rock the name Chicago as a mantle for that reason. Also would like to add the fact that Slick came up with a banger correspondence weave when he pointed out the fact that Chicago is a northern city in North America, and in Chicago you have the Chicago Bears and the Chicago Cubs. Great Bear, Little Bear, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor. I mean, come on. That's so fascinating and interesting. I'll never forget when you said that, dude. That's a really, really good one. So yeah, excellent question. Excellent insight here. Hey, Yakov, dude, your voicemail was excellent. It's going to be in the show. Please continue submitting those. Very, very good stuff, man. I really, really appreciate your perspective. What does the Tropic of Cancer really mean? I mean, based on my research, basically the Tropic of Cancer is the northernmost point where the sun kind of apexes at the summer solstice, and then it starts retreating and it starts going more southern. And then when it hits the Tropic of Capricorn, that is actually sort of its furthest south it'll ever go. And so that's when in the northern hemisphere, the Tropic of Cancer is why we have the summer solstice, why there's the most sunlight, the longest day of the year, and then conversely, why it's the darkest day of the year during the winter solstice. So that's kind of, I don't know if that's what you were looking for or whatever, but that's what comes to mind in case you weren't aware of that. I never know where people are at with some of this stuff. But perhaps they're encoding other stuff. Of course, they're encoding other stuff, right? But that's kind of the deal. But I have a lot of questions, man, about just everything. Still, the more I learn, the more questions I have. So please, someone correct me or share your insights with all of this stuff. Ardquark, thank you for answering my question. Intermediary does make sense. Correspondence with hidden traditional things. Love Robert Phoenix. Yeah, he's great. Love Who Built the Moon. Look forward to more of your work. Very cool. Appreciate that. Hoop Daddy, you're the second person that said something about Virgo and Leo in the Sphinx. Yeah, it's definitely there. Many thanks, Sirius B. Appreciate it. Sedentary versus nomadic is huge. I love your take on Gemini twins, free versus citizen. Yeah. That's definitely part of it. Bears and cubs. Wow. Yeah, I know, right? That's a huge one. Don't you think lynxes are lunar lions? I mean, a cat's head, when stylized, is crescent shaped. Sphinxes symbolize the lynx. Don't you think lynxes are lunar lions? To be honest, I can't say I've thought about it too much. But yeah, I mean, even just being around cats, the lunar quality is like definitely there, for multiple reasons. So, like the serpent as an example, it's like there's serpent symbolism that associates with the sun, solar symbolism, lunar symbolism, polar symbolism. In fact, really everything has a triune nature to it. So everything has a yin, a yang, and this thing that precedes it, which I think is more polar and primordial. And so no matter what you're looking at, you're going to find that, in my opinion. Even the most masculine of things has a feminine sort of dynamic to it. Even the most feminine of things, myths, deities, whatever, has a masculine sort of correspondence. The way I've heard it put is, when you look into the yin, you will find the yang. When you look into the yang, you will find the yin. In my opinion, both yin and yang come from a polar sort of dynamic. A place of non-duality is another way of kind of putting it. A central sort of place related to source, that precedes even polarity or duality, in my opinion. That's kind of how I see it personally. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, lunar lions, yeah. There's something to that for sure. Not just exclusively cats aren't exclusively solar, for sure. Thanks so much. I'm excited to hear the episode. Yeah, no, of course. I appreciate once again what you submitted there. Chicago School Economics, most nefarious school. Check how go. Lunar sounds like lynx. Yeah. Gotcha. Awesome, guys. Well, once again, thank you so much for hanging out, tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of that. I'll be releasing that podcast episode on Friday just for patrons and supporters. So get on that if you're interested. It's a really good one. I'm super pumped on how it's coming along here. And of course, for all things symbolic studies, please visit symbolicstudies.com. And I will see you guys hopefully sooner than later. All right. Take care. Have a good one.